Well, welcome to What Matters, Water, TV, and Podcast, where we explore the issues that flow through our lives and the drops that create ripples across communities. I'm your host, Charley Wilson, and today we're diving into an essential topic that touches every aspect of our lives: equity, access, and affordability in the world of water. In a world where H2O is vital to our existence, it's easy to take for granted the complexities and challenges that come with ensuring equitable access and affordable water for all. Today, we've got a special episode all about making California landmark the human right to water a reality. And we're thrilled to have some remarkable guests joining us. On our panel today, it features the dynamic mix of perspectives. With us, we have Martin Ludlow, the grassroots champion of water justice, who is bringing his skills as a policymaker and community champion to a new organization called Groundswell for Water Justice. We also have a city leader in the forefront of the fight, Mayor Acquanetta Warren, the four-term mayor of the city of Fontana, and an outspoken advocate for underserved communities. And our third guest is a seasoned utility expert, Anatole Falagan. He's the assistant general manager of Long Beach Utilities, and he brings decades of experience running water systems. These three are the ones shaping the conversation on this crucial issue. Mayor Warren and Anatole are co-chairing the Southern California Water Coalition Task Force on this very issue. Together, we'll explore the nuances of this challenge, how it impacts different regions across California, the need for champions, and how best to connect Southern California's diverse communities. We'll also dive into the nitty-gritty of governance and what it means for those smaller water systems with unique struggles. As we embark on this journey, we will be asking the big questions and seeking resolutions. How can we engage our communities in understanding the true value of water services? What legislative and regulatory changes are on the horizon? And most importantly, is this a political battle or a problem-solving mission? So whether you're a seasoned water warrior or just dipping your toes into this issue, join us as we navigate the depths of equity, inclusion, and affordability in this realm of water. Let's dive in. Well, Mayor Warren, Anatole, and Martin, thank you all so much for being with us on What Matters, Water, TV, and Podcast. I have to start our conversation today, I think, with the honorable, if you will, and I'm just going to admit it right up front. She's also my chair, so I kind of have to start with Mayor Warren. That you've been at the forefront of this fight for water equity in the city of Fontana. Share with us a little bit the specific challenge that you've encountered trying to ensure equitable access to clean drinking water for your constituents, and what innovative solutions have you been able to come up with or have you explored?
Charlie, I'm following your mantra about working with everyone. As you're very much aware, we have several water companies servicing our great town. As a result of that, it is important that we all sit down from time to time and remember why we're doing this. The biggest challenge is infrastructure. All of our infrastructure is aging, and without proper monies to keep those things up, we are worried about our water source. We have to make sure that each of the water companies are working together also because we share so much together. So anything that the state is looking at right now to assist our efforts in infrastructure, we're on top of it because we need it.
So thank you, Warren. Martin, I'm going to then move to you because you really served as a champion of water justice. You've also served in elective office. You're deeply familiar and have firsthand experience with the impact of the disparities in access to clean water. Provide for me, if you could, some insights on how the disparities affect underserved communities and what grassroots efforts or initiatives have really shown promise in trying to address some of these issues. Because this is a whole different part of the conversation of trying to bring in not just water purveyors.
Charlie, thank you for that. I couldn't agree with the mayor more. You have to apologize. Accept my apologies today. I'm dealing with the after effects of double vaccination yesterday, and it's sort of I'm taking it on full bore. But if you look at the history of some of the most devastating water-based calamities in recent American history, they all are a function of lack of infrastructure. Whether you look at Flint, whether you look at Jackson, Mississippi, whether you look at New Orleans, whether you look at Fajardo here in California, these are functions of lack of water infrastructure. In California, ironically, when our water infrastructure was built over 100 years ago, it's for a population of 20 million people. We now have 40 million people in California, and zero increase has been done in the establishment of an infrastructure capable of delivering water. To your specific question, when you're faced in a low-income community without having access to water, it's hard to really put into words the impact that it has on a family that cannot afford to make a phone call, have water delivered, or get to a local grocery store and have access to, ample supply. I remember, and again, this wasn't necessarily a water-based calamity, but it spoke to the power of water. In 1992, right after the LA riots, I was in South LA. I was helping volunteer with the Red Cross. And I remember lines of people at Manchester and Main Street for as far as the eye could see. Maxine Waters was out there. We had so many people just literally carrying buckets of water because people were desperate for that basic necessity for human life. And I think we've got to wake up as a state and as a society and recognize that affluent communities are not as impacted as the low-income communities are. We've been held hostage by quote unquote enviros for way too long. And I think what we also know is that this is really sort of a mask for NIMBYism. We want to do everything we can as a state to prevent low-income housing from being built. And so we don't allow increased water infrastructure to be established. We don't allow for additional water hookups to happen because we don't want these low-income families living in our backyard. And it's just time that we got to wake up and change that narrative. And I think on the grassroots advocacy side, we created Groundswell to be that voice in California. We're a new entity, but all of the organizations, 1,500 social justice leaders all over the state of California, who are not new people at all to the fight for social and economic justice, from the SCLC to the NAACP to Field, United Farm Workers, Dolores Huerta, Mark Morial. I mean, we have brought together some of the most powerful grassroots organizations and national leaders in the country to come together to say enough is enough. And I'll just sort of end it with this. I will never forget seeing the mayor on a television show after it was one of the recent atmospheric reservoirs, and she really captured it correctly. We look at all this water coming down. We can't capture a drop of it.
That's right.
It's got to be the biggest crime that we've ever seen being committed in broad daylight. So anyway, I just appreciate being here and appreciate the leadership that so many people like you or Charley are showing. So we got to stay together, though. It's going to be.
We appreciate that, and just kind of to round this sort of out on this part of the real strength of what it is that we do. Anatole, I mean, you come at this even a little bit more differently in that you're the assistant general manager of Long Beach Utilities, so you're a provider, and you have that different providers sort of perspective on the technical and the managerial aspects of water service. Sharon, we've talked about this off on the side, but could you shed some light on the technical challenges that are faced by small water systems with that limited service connection? I mean, it's one thing, as you say in this case, it matters, your size matters. And in a lot of cases, we've got 300 failing community water systems that serve less than something like 1,000 connections. So you're talking about relatively small, I'll call them pockets, not big areas, but when you have that sort of discrepancy and that failure of service, it has a much bigger impact, does it not?
Thank you. Yes, it doesn't scale down equally. So as we get smaller and smaller, to say that I have a problem and you're half my size, it doesn't mean that problem is now twice as big. It actually gets almost insurmountable for some of the small water suppliers. And that has a lot to do with the comments that you just heard in terms of infrastructure, right? In the 20th century, infrastructure was related to growth. 20 million to 40 million people. And we just, as water providers, small and big, we just kept on building infrastructure. And here's the very important aspect. In many cases, much of that infrastructure was clearly understood to be paid by ratepayers. It's kind of like your gasoline tax pays for the interstate highway. So when it comes time to build interstate highways, the federal government steps in because they're collecting the gasoline tax. So for much of this time, water purveyors and water providers have found themselves always in this position that infrastructure is driven by water rates. And consequently, whoever is drinking the water is going to pay for it. But I'll close with this comment to pass along the conversation. In the 21st century, we're not talking necessarily about growth. We're talking about things that these ratepayers had no way of causing themselves. Climate change is affecting demands on water. Contamination from contaminants that the ratepayers themselves that are drinking the water had no particular absolute responsibility in causing. And so consequently, it becomes a different kind of conversation when we talk about infrastructure that needs to get built. And we then turn around and say, well, it's on the ratepayer. That makes that problem that was mine, as it scales down to smaller and smaller community water districts, those problems become monumental as to how you're going to build that infrastructure. Because indeed, in this state, we talk about a human right to water. Everybody should have access to clean, safe, and reliable water.
Well, and I've heard it talked in many different quarters that it's literally a crime that you've got the 5th largest economy in the world, and yet we still have, I call them pockets, have communities. I mean, there's some pretty significant areas, including detailed areas within Southern California that are in this predicament, that do not have access to clean and affordable water. So you're right. It's somewhere along the line, some things got missed. And I guess I'd ask the question this way. I spent a lot of time in the water business, and it's full of engineers and it's full of lawyers. And so it's, we can design anything, Charlie. We can build anything. But looking at this broader landscape, aren't we really talking about policy changes or legislative action that needs to take place at the state level to improve the equity, access, and affordability of water service in Southern California or statewide? Or is it an engineering problem? We just need somebody to go design it and build it. And I'm going to start, Martin, with you, because I know this is kind of a lot of where Groundswell has really focused in on this public policy aspect. And how are you experiencing this in the design versus policy realm?
No, Charlie, it's a great question. And so I'll just borrow the words of Senator Stephen Bradford. Senator Bradford came to one of our Groundswell gatherings, said, it should never be the case where you can build NFL stadiums and NBA arenas faster than you can build water projects in the state of California. We've built 5 major sporting arenas in the state in the same time that we've not started one full water conveyance project in the state of California. That's just upside down, and it boggles the mind how anything like that could be reality in this modern era. And so I think, as our new speakers in play now, I think the idea of CEQA corrections is a way that people are sort of, I see the mayor grinning because, you say CEQA reform and everybody loses it, right? So I think there's some CEQA right. So there's some CEQA corrections that we got to do. And, and I'll just make it simple. I think, everyone on this call is an expert in this industry, but for people who may not be, who may watch this podcast and may not be as familiar, at the end of the day, California passed an extraordinary package of laws to ensure that every single public works project in the state was properly vetted by experts. It is absolutely abhorrent that you can go through that process and it doesn't matter. It just takes one lawyer to file a lawsuit and your project is deep sixed for 25 years. We've got to fix that, Charlie.
Well, and I think that's part of the frustration. So, Mayor Warren, I mean, you get this, whether it's at the local municipal level with housing or commercial enterprises within your community. When it takes 15 plus years to build anything of significance, or even the threat of building something, you can have the promise, and then somebody, as Martin just indicated, can kind of come in and sabotage the whole thing. What's your perspective as a policy leader in terms of that balance between what you can do at the local level versus the state or even at the national level?
Well, and there's added problems because people from wherever can just show up, say for instance at the Attorney General's office, say, hey, they're down there messing with everybody, blah blah blah, and next you're putting resources to defend yourself, when in fact you're doing what the state asked you to do, particularly when it comes to housing. A good example is, I always tell people, everybody want to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Nobody wants to step it up and say we need to have these projects not only approved, but protected, because it's protecting the livelihood and the quality of life of so many people. When I see people with these shopping carts with these large, big bottles to get water, I know some of it's cultural that they don't trust the water, but people don't realize it's all coming from the same place. But we have to stop playing around, because that faucet one day is not going to have the drip of water coming out of it. And I'm a Wello, Water Education for Latino Leaders, with Victor Griego, that group. He taught me so much. We were up in Central Valley. It was horrible. People in lines to get those bottles of water. And I want to echo on what Martin talked about. I moved from Compton, but I grew up in South Central. I was there after the Rodney King verdict. It was horrible. We didn't have gasoline, we didn't have lights, and we did not have water. So when it comes to infrastructure for water and for other ideas and things that we need to function, you will always get a champion person from me, because we deserve not to have to even worry about this stuff. We need changes, particularly in CEQA, because it is scrapping this entire state to a place where we will never be able to recover. We're losing time.
You are losing time. So Anatole, you don't have any of those problems in Long Beach, I can tell, because it's, a built out city. But, as again, I'm going to ask you that staff perspective, the guy that's on that other side of sort of taking project requests in, how you serve a growing community, even though it's within the boundaries of the city of Long Beach right now, you're still growing a population base with essentially the same infrastructure that you've had for 50 years. So in your perspective, are there public policy initiatives? Is it a policy issue, or is this an engineering financial issue, or maybe a little bit of both?
All right, I think it's a little bit of both. In conversations that I've had with state legislators, even briefings that we've done with some of our federal representatives, one of the things that a perspective I've come away with is the need for a belief in a shared crisis. For water providers, sometimes it's very unclear to people and they don't understand the legal basis of it. But in the state of California, we have a legal requirement of cost of service justification for water rates for municipal water suppliers. And at first glance, you say to yourself, well, that's a terrible idea because I want to do this or I want to do that, and I can't do more than what it actually costs to serve water. But I think from an equity standpoint, it's important to remember that it also protects ratepayers from disadvantaged communities or underserved neighborhoods, because they cannot find themselves legally subsidizing somebody else. Okay, so having said that, the shared crisis aspect has a lot to do with this aspect that I just made in my previous comments, right? Climate change is not something that these communities caused. And when it comes to other aspects of equitable access to safe water, whether it's contaminants or others, this aspect of equity and access is something that they are not responsible for either. However, there are multiple partners that can be joined into that responsibility. The state, for example, with its climate action goals and desires to manage policy in that manner, and also policy and legislative efforts towards equity and access. If they really are partners in that manner, that means that either a frame of mind or a policy shift has to occur, where the legislators are more inclined to understand that infrastructure is not going to get built alone by these small water agencies building things themselves. They're going to need partners that help with funding and effort to make it easier for them, even for the current discussion of CEQA. It's really hard for a small agency to deal with CEQA. Hard enough for me as it is, but the smaller you are, the harder it is. So I think if you have the mindset that this is a shared crisis, then you can bring those partners together and join in the effort.
Well, then what you're really talking about, this is not so much a policy engineering issue as a political issue, and building kind of the political wherewithal, the political cohesion, the political pressure, as you use the phrase, building a crisis. So So let me play off of that, because politics, when you get to Sacramento, you get to Washington, there's a lot of needs. We like to talk about that frequently. California is really blessed for being really big and really diverse. And yeah, when we got these issues, we're really big and really diverse, which means our political leaders are really diverse in terms of their interest and where they put their time, their energy, their talent and treasure. And it doesn't sound like water is really one of those areas of highly focused attention. So I guess the question I'm going to ask is, in terms of the equity and access and making water still affordable, again, I'm also reminded of a former CEO I had that, we can pave the streets in gold, but if nobody can afford to drive on them, they're worthless. So you've got to do all these things and still allow people the ability to afford what they're doing. How do we navigate the political rhetoric that we find ourselves in, whether it's, and Martin, you indicated, you talk CEQA, people freak out. Well, if we talk streamlining, we talk focus, maybe it's better. But so how are you, given the coalition for the grassroots coalition, sort of what you've established and what you're trying to build, how do you work through that political rhetoric, and where are you finding welcome voices? And are you finding anybody willing to stand up for water in this particular arena?
Well, it's going to sound like I'm, just doing this because she's on the call, but, there are very few Mayor Warrens in the state of California, but we're finding them. She's got clearly good colleagues in the mayor of Compton, Mayor Sharif. We've found, great support from mayors of Palo Alto and some of the other parts of the state. But I think, it's fascinating, Charlie, we will all remember when one young president came in by the name of Barack Obama. We got a term, it was coined, and we'll never forget it, and it was called shovel-ready projects. We've got to raise the specter of urgency, as the mayor just indicated, that visualization of a spigot being turned on and nothing coming out of it. More and more counties and areas in California are already there, where ground is sinking in Central Valley because of the dryness and the wells that have fallen in. We've got to get that imagery out. We've got to get policymakers to understand that the crisis is here, and through climate change, it's only going to get more dangerous and devastating. But we've got to get our political mindset to a place where, and I do salute the governor. I think he's made some aggressive steps this year to try to dive in. But we've got to get everyone to understand that the idea of shovel ready, push the red tape to the side, push the lawsuits to the side, and courts have got to be our friend. And I do agree with my colleague from Long Beach that, the federal government can take a huge page. I'm hoping that Senator-elect or Senator nominee Butler can join in this clarion call for change, because we need it right now, and we need the feds to step up and lead that, carry that torch. So I think it's all of that. But quite frankly, that imagery of a spigot being turned on and nothing coming out, I think that's the type of public information commercials we need to really get that mindset back there. So,
well, Acquanetta, I'm going to turn to you then. I mean, you deal in this world of that I'll call it conflict, that tension between local government and what you were autonomously asked to perform, and then there are those areas that you need the assistance or the guidance and or sometimes the state to just kind of get off your back. And then, of course, you could always throw in the federal government, and that always makes for a fun day to kind of let's all mix it up. But you live in that political world. And are you finding any sort of hope, any rays of sunshine in finding state or federal officials who are willing to stand up on this issue? And I say that with all due respect, because I get it, right? There's crime and there's drugs and there's homelessness. And then, there's a lot of really pressing things, usually driven by what's on the front page of the paper that day. And, bringing attention to an issue like this sometimes can be difficult without some catastrophe.
But, you have to bring people together, like we always say, and you have to travel to DC, and you have to make your point in that manner, because it's important. When you look at the funding that is available, I'm very blessed. I've got superstars. I've got Congresswoman Norma Torres and Congressman member Pete Aguilar. And I'm telling you, Senator Padilla I've seen what he can do with, particularly when we're talking about infrastructure and raise grants and homelessness. All of them have stepped up to the plate. It's up to every city to form those relationships with your congressional partners, especially if you're applying for grants. The water companies, I tell them every day that service, don't leave me out of this conversation. I will go with you. I will help you. We want to see cooperative efforts toward making sure that when you turn on that faucet, it's still working. But it's also educating our public. Don't vote for people that don't have your interests, that aren't talking to issues that relate to your quality of life. So often I hear so many state officials, not that much at the federal level lately, but they'll start off talking about a subject and everybody in the room is on the other side and you're on that side. And it's like I have to send notes. Hey, we're talking about quality of life. We'll be happy to sign up for that other stuff later. But right now, you need to tell people you're going to help them with their water. You need to tell people you're going to help them with a job. And you need to help them with housing. But then there's no communication. Look what happened in housing. The governor, he's doing a great job. I love that Delta conveyance project, and we're going to get behind that 100%. We need it. But you're doing ADUs for housing. You're not including us to the table. Now we have more stress on the infrastructure. Nobody thought about the sewer lines or the water lines. I got shut down in a meeting bringing it up. Everybody's like, Acquanetta, sit down. Nobody want to hear all that. Well, you know what? You're going to hear it. Because when those people start adding all this housing in the back of their house, their water don't work right. Their plumbing ain't good. Now they're adding another resource to it. Good luck, everybody. We've got to come together. We've got to throw all these labels we've given ourselves out of the door, sit down and say, what makes sense for our citizens? Remember them? That's what I want to say. Remember those people we all said when we were in high school, I'm going to go out and serve them one day. Remember them, because you're not serving them now.
Anatole, again, you kind of get put in that tough spot. You know, you're on that city side, and cities don't play in politics per se, other than
well, they always want to make us the bad guy, trying to take local control. You want me to go there today, Charlie? You better stick with water.
No, Acquanetta, don't go there.
Stick with water.
But in Long Beach, I was going to say, it's almost like that's like a softball I can put up for Anatole, because his former mayor is now a local congressman. So I guess, you know, to be fair, right, is it helpful for someone like Mr. Garcia goes to Washington, the background that he had having served as a local mayor, does that help him then to articulate to his colleagues, and does it help deliver sort of the necessary messaging and programs back to the city or the region of Long Beach when somebody like that you have a relationship with?
It absolutely does. You know, somebody with a background like that goes to serve our communities at the federal government level. Then when you come forward with this aspect of shared crisis, with this aspect of need, sometimes, you know, like take my city here, Long Beach, for example. We're talking about underserved neighborhoods. We're talking about underserved communities that are neighborhoods within a city. And sometimes, you know, there's up and down the state, there's all these small water suppliers, there's all these small unincorporated areas in the Central Valley of the state. Those are critically in need of all kinds of infrastructure and support. But within large urban areas, many times it's the ability to relate and understand that communities have neighborhoods and entire sections of a city that are equally deserving of that need for infrastructure, that need for funding, that human right to water. And so somebody like Congressmember Garcia, who now is serving very well in our Congress, they have that background and the perspective, and it really helps in the discussion, because I think it's an untapped opportunity coming forward with so much of the water crisis affecting the Western United States. It's going to take representatives like Representative Garcia to really come forward and help us make a difference in getting funds.
Charlie, not to interrupt, there's a common denominator he just hit. Congresswoman Norma Torres was a mayor, and so was Pete Aguilar. They were mayors. Mayors get it done, Charlie.
All right. I see us launching, Martin. You're taking notes on this, right? The new political action committee is being formed here. and we'll just fill in
That's
mayor.
the chair right there. That's the chair right there.
That's going to be mayor for Congress, which is
no.
we'll just start filling them in. So we can sort of move people up the chain of command, Acquanetta. So
No, my cousin already told me I wouldn't make it. I'd be in jail the first day.
Oh, jeez. No, we don't want to go there either, Acquanetta. But I wanted to kind of get to this place then. So we've got policy, we've got policies, projects, and funding. But now you're really talking about, all of you talk to some degree about then what is the coalition? What are the various interests that need to come together? Again, if I just come in as a water manager, it's like, hey, thanks very much, appreciate the information, next. But if I then come in with housing interests and communities interests and local government interests and labor interests and ag interests, I am now starting, it seems to me, to put sort of a big, hard to ignore kind of a push to get these things done. So I guess my question would be, in each of your case, I'm going to start with you, Martin, on share with me, because this really speaks to the groundswell component of how are you building a coalition or coalition initiatives, models? What do you see as being most effective and the kinds of things that the Southern California Water Coalition and others should be looking to emulate or to join? And are there any kind of significant initiatives you've got going kind of into the next year's legislative session that would be helpful for us to be a partner on?
I'll try to see if I can capture each of those.
We only have an hour and a half, so feel free. Go right ahead.
So I'll be very, very quick. So I don't think we're doing anything new. I think we're being very intentional. And so it's old school pounding, feet to the pavement. We're writing letters. We're doing, virtual meetings. We're doing in-person meetings. We're attending hearings. We're taking people up to Sacramento. We're showing up at local water district hearings to help advocate for votes. I think a lot of people don't have any idea about what these water district councils look like, what these water district boards look like. They don't really look like California, not from a ethnic perspective or even a gender perspective. It's largely white men that have been on these boards for quite some time, and they are very insular. It's almost like a good old boy system. And I think it behooves all of us to first really take a stab at, and I think you guys do a great job, Charlie. When I first met what you guys were doing, I honestly, I was blown away. I came to one of your luncheons and I just saw an incredibly diverse audience, an incredibly wide audience that covered the span of Southern California. And I that's why anytime you invite me to anything, I want to be there to support it, because I think you guys are doing it right. And I think Mayor Warren said it as well. It doesn't really matter, what you look like. We gotta find those partnerships across the aisles here, and we get caught into some of that partisan stuff. In this effort, we're finding Republicans, Democrats, Independents working together. We're finding business and labor working together. I think we find some smart enviros and environmental justice activists working together. And so I don't think it's necessarily anything new, but I do know that our coalition, we couldn't find anything like it in the state, and we felt like we needed to do it to help elevate the voices of those municipal leaders and those courageous water district officials, newly elected people like Adan Ortega and others that are, really out there on the front lines. I just think that we've got to keep the pressure up. And I'll kind of end it on this, I think, to one point you raised, Charlie. I think it's very fascinating. If you go back 100 years, you see this unprecedented effort to support the movement of cars, how fast we were willing to devastate neighborhoods of color to make way for freeways to ensure we can move cars. Right now, we have communities of color that are being devastated by lack of access to clean, affordable water. But the last thing we're ever going to talk about doing is building conveyance projects and infrastructure projects. I just think that we've lost our way. We've lost our way. It's time to really shake up the body politic and tell the real stories behind what's happening here.
Well, and that's a great point. I'm going to come back to you, Acquanetta, because, as I go through the state, and I've been doing this for a little while around infrastructure, and so when we had some really successful engagement last year with the state legislature. But I mean, I can go to a particular part of the state, the Bay Delta, area, and I can tell you that the Bay Delta caucus, the elected state representatives, they are absolutely in unity, and it's hell no. Those people outside of my region are never going to have this modernized state water infrastructure. And I keep looking around for, okay, so who is it from Southern California? Where is that caucus that's going to stand up and say, here's where it needs to go. Here's what needs to be built. Here's what needs to be funded, and not be afraid that there's going to be some conflict. And it's, but this is part of the legislative negotiated process and the value, at least my perspective, in a coalition and having multiple voices and not leaving it to any single voice to have to carry the full weight.
We've got I see a shred of hope, particularly when you look at the Inland Empire, which is San Bernardino County is the largest county in the United States by, land mass, which goes a long way. But I see people like our Assembly member, James Ramos, who is clearly ready to work with everybody. He brought together all of our elected state officials in San Bernardino County related to issues of industrial jobs with the unions, environmental justice. It was a really good event. But what I saw there was the eye-opener for the assembly members and the senators, because all of a sudden we were telling them, we need you not to bully, but be stronger and speak higher for us. These days of just having the North, because that's what it comes down to, having the North speak for everybody, they have to go away. And it's not only at the state level. All of these organizations that we belong to, a good example, League of City, California Contract City, it's going to be up to those organizations that we all belong to start speaking up for us, to start representing us, and not cow down when the Northern contingency decides we're not dealing with those people down there. Well, you know what? We need to make sure that the strength is for everyone. We cannot, as a state, continue to isolate each other. We're in battle and we're in competition with other states. And I'll tell you, when I was in banking, I went running to New York, with my little suit on. I'm a vice president. Who are you talking to? Got in New York and got my hat brought to me because they were prepared and they were united and they weren't having that California mess in their area. We have got to stick together and throw the labels out and start working for the people that we serve, or it's going to be bad for everyone because people need us more than anything right now. So I'm willing to work with anybody. And that's what Assemblymember Ramos really touched me with in his formation of that group, to discuss the issue instead of fighting the issues. Get together. See where we agree more. You'll find we agree more on issues than we do on other issues we don't agree on. So stick with those issues until we learn how to get along.
So Anatole, and this is the one place I think, even in your realm with the cities, you belong to lots of other regional, state, and national groups. Are those coalitions helpful, effective in bringing
Absolutely.
attention?
Mayor Robinson from Rialto, God bless her, she has been fighting the water fight for a long time, and she hasn't tried to even give up on it, and knocks me in my head and says, get in here. Don't forget to get in here and talk to everybody. But we have champions out there in these organizations that will work with us, and we're all trying to pull everyone else into the conversation. It's necessary. And so U.S. Conference of Mayors has their task force, our league, we're doing some things there, but we all know without infrastructure renovation, we're in trouble. We're in big trouble.
Well, we had great success as again, Southern California Water Coalition in the last couple of years. Martin, we were just sort of stealing pages out of your book anyway. And so we now are partnering to try to break down that statewide sort of, I'll call it myth, that, we're now partnering with the Bay Area Council in the Sacramento Bay Area on key issues, and the San Joaquin Valley Water Blueprint, relatively new group trying to bring new people from the Central Valley, just in basics. So when we go together, the three of us as that three-legged stool to Sacramento on things like funding requests, it was much more impactful to go say, wow, you guys have been able to set aside some of those regional differences. And if you can agree on these things, well, at least now we got something really to talk about, something to negotiate. Yeah. But in all of that, though, and Anatole, I'm going to start with you on this because, we've sort of talked about this again as well. Diverse state, right? With language and culture and region, and everybody's kind of got their own sort of thing going. That's again the advantage of a big state, a big diverse state, and then trying to find ways to coalesce. So doesn't that really become an issue about how we communicate, and are there tools, are there processes, are there things that you've done within Long Beach that we could emulate or we could share, where you've brought the coalition, you've communicated, we've educated, we've brought people along to their point where people said, hey, you know what? I need to be part of it.
So since about 2015, for us, this communication about issues revolving around water, safe, clean, reliable water, water conservation, water use efficiency. If you've been listening to the words I've been saying for the past few seconds, that probably bored you to tears. And I think that is probably indicative of where we don't want to be with our messaging. The conversations that you've had here, Charley, described to you a passion, a desire to reach people emotionally, to get them to be affected by one or more issues related to water. And in Long Beach, our campaign messages have been focused on exactly that. In a nutshell, when we're delivering messages in Long Beach, I don't want you to think about what we're telling you. I want you to feel it. And so for us, on so many different dimensions, our communication messages to our communities have much to do with lifestyle, with beliefs, with an outlook, if you will. And it's through that type of approach that we've been very, very successful in not only reducing our water usage, but just making the public aware of other related water quality issues. And because we're a sewer provider as well as the community of the city, then even sewage issues as well.
Well, Martin, this is really your bailiwick, right? And this is where, when you have invited me to participate in each of the three summits that I've been privileged to sit in on with the Groundswell, I mean, this is your wheelhouse, man. I have been so impressed with the diversity, the numbers, the level of people, the number of times that, the former mayor of Los Angeles, Mr. Villaraigosa, I mean, he is such an effective rallying point. How is it, and what can we learn from that in terms of messaging and language and sort of building upon that? Or do we just say, hey, you know what? That's what they do. Let them do it really, really well. We kind of do these other things and we'll just do that really, really well. Do we need to cross-pollinate, or is this something that we ought to be learning from each other?
Well, I think when we're talking water, we should always have the mayor of water, Acquanetta. I think that's a starting point. It doesn't get any better than that, right?
Wait, I think there's still time for the Thursday, for what we're doing later. Acquanetta, we're rebranding you for next year.
America's water mayor. I love it. It doesn't get any better than that. But no, I Charley, by the way, thank you so much. Coming from you, it really does mean a lot. And I say that the gatherings and the reach that you've accomplished are just incredible. And I do think that it speaks to what everybody can do. You have a voice, you have a reach, and you're cross-pollinating that by bringing in a Groundswell. And I think a lot of the developers, a lot of the engineering firms, the contractors are being brought to the table through you, through us together. And that's, I think, really what the mayor was saying earlier. And I think we got to do that more and more. And I do think it does, I hate to say it, it does box in some of the more reticent politicians to feel that heat, that it's a full court press. Everybody's in agreement and people are with them. So I think we all just keep doing what we're doing. And really salute you for pulling the podcast together and everything that you guys are. You got your big board meeting coming up this week and looking forward to that. So This is a marathon, right? It's gonna take a long time, and we're not gonna have any quick solutions. We're gonna have another devastating winter. It's coming, and I hope that we can capture some of this dire messaging in the midst of that deluge that's coming down, because it's coming. And as you know, we all know, we've got to get off of stupid, and we got to start fixing these problems quickly.
Got it. Well, and you set it up then perfectly. So final word goes to the water mayor, Acquanetta Warren. That's why he's good at what he does, Acquanetta.
Martin, I tell you, Martin is amazing. His group is amazing. Anatole, he is just great. He's a technician, an engineer. He's got it all in one big thing there. And I think the things that have helped me is my prior experience as Deputy Public Works Director in the city of Upland, where we had to deal with it all in one shop, and we all got along and we made it happen. But here's the real problem. We are seeing more and more people retiring, and we're not training people to come behind them. Now, you think we have a crisis now? You just wait when it's time to do those water tests, quality tests, and nobody shows up. You will then see a real change in behavior in this state. We have got to make the number one priority water availability for everyone. 2, we got to make sure that we're training that next group of people to come behind to learn how to run the water systems. And 3, this is a time for us all to come together on an issue that there should never, ever be an argument. No family, no person, no one should have to get up in the morning and worry whether or not they're going to have that sacred thing we call water. You know, it has to be that simple. That's how simple it has to be.
And sometimes, as we all know, those things that are most simple become much more complicated and difficult to accomplish. So I'm going to have to leave it for this time. I'm going to use that language specifically this time, because there is going to be another time we're going to bring you all together. So Mayor Acquanetta Warren, Anatole Falagan, and Martin Ludlow, thank you so much for being part of What Matters, Water and TV. We look forward to coalescing, working together and advancing the cause of water with the legislature and our community to meet the needs. So we thank you all for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Well, thanks for joining us on What Matters Water TV and Podcast. If you like today's discussion, go to wherever you download your podcasts and give us that 5-star rating. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. That'll help us build our presence in this new world and on this format. And if you're interested in sponsoring this program, well, please reach out here at SoCalWater.org and send us a message. As we close today's show, I leave you with this challenge. Be a part of the conversation. Be a part of the solution. At the Southern California Water Coalition, we educate to advocate. So as public policy leaders have difficult choices, together we help them make informed decisions. Thanks for being with us. We will see you again next time here on What Matters Water TV and Podcast.